My neighbors think of me as a humble retiree moonlighting in a jewelry store. No one guesses that Higginbotham Jewelry is my business, built from the ground up when I moved here after Evelyn died. Evelyn was my compass. When illness took her, I decided to leave the hustle and bustle of the big city behind. Our only son, Christopher, had just started university, and I thought the change would be good for us. But it turned I can't do without the smell of polishing paste and the touch of metal. My house is an old one-story cottage with a garden. I could buy something bigger, but why? The furniture is the same as it was 30 years ago. In the living room is Evelyn's piano, which no one plays. Sometimes I wipe the keys trying to remember the tunes she used to play in the evenings. The neighbors would probably be surprised to know the state of my bank account. I've never sought to show off wealth. Money is just a tool, like my tweezers or my drill. The only luxuries I allow myself are rare stones for the collection. They are kept in a safe in the workshop, and I only get them for myself. Christopher visits me a couple times a year. He thinks I should sell the store and buy an apartment closer to him. Whenever he does, I guffaw that my flat-floor house is more comfortable for old knees than his high-rise. My son doesn't understand my attachment to my work. To him, jewelry is just a commodity that requires storage in a safety deposit box. On his last visit in the spring, something changed. He called and said he wanted to introduce me to his girlfriend. "Dad, she's special." His voice sounded different than usual. "We're going to get married." The news took me by surprise. Christopher is 40 years old, and in all those years, he's never brought anyone to me. There have been some women, but none who've had the honor of introducing him to my father. "I'd be happy to meet them," I said, going over possible gifts for my future daughter-in-law in my head. 2 weeks later, they arrived. I set the table on the veranda. Nothing special. Salads, cold chicken, homemade bread from Mrs. Prentice next door. I decided to get a good wine, from the batch I'd ordered for my 70th birthday. Their car arrived after 6 o'clock. The son looked younger and uncertain at the same time. She stood beside him, a tall, dazzling woman with perfect posture and a cold gaze. "Dad, this is Veronique Edelstein, my fiancée," Christopher introduced her. "Veronique, this is my father, Robert." "Nice to meet you." Her handshake was light and short, like touching something unpleasant. "Christopher has told me so little about you." There was something subtly insulting in her tone, as if the lack of information about me were a natural consequence of my insignificance. "I hope to remedy that omission," I smiled. "Come in, everything is ready on the veranda." As we walked through the house, I noticed her gaze sliding over the old furniture, the faded rugs, the bookshelves with ragged spines. "What an authentic house," she said, giving the word authentic the meaning of outdated. At the table, Veronique sat up straight, barely touching her food. She worked as a curator at an art gallery specializing in contemporary art. She talked about exhibitions, collectors, and some big names, clearly enjoying the fact that I didn't recognize any of them. Christopher looked at her adoringly, pouring wine and agreeing all the time. "And what do you do, Mr. Higginbotham?" she asked when I brought dessert. "I'm retired," I answered truthfully. "Sometimes I work part-time at the local jewelry store." "Oh," she raised her eyebrows. "How nice. It must help relieve the loneliness." "Dad used to be a jeweler," Christopher put in. "He knows a thing or two about stones." "Really?" Her gaze fell on my humble signet ring. "And what kind of jewelry do you sell in your store?" "Various." I deliberately did not go into details. "More repairing old jewelry than selling new. Mountain Home is a small town." "Yes, I can see that." She glanced around my garden and the neighboring houses. "Christopher said you didn't want to move. I can see why. It's so peaceful." That quiet sounded like miserable. "Veronique was recently promoted," the son said proudly. "She will now be in charge of the gallery's international relations." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That sounds impressive." "Thank you," she smiled slightly. "That means I have a lot of traveling to do. I hope Christopher won't be too bored." "I'll travel with you whenever I can," her son said hastily. "We've already discussed this." I thought about my rare visits to him and realized that now they would be even fewer. "Where did you two meet?" I asked, changing the subject. "At a charity auction," Christopher answered. "I was there with my colleagues, and Veronique was representing the gallery. I saw him across the room. Veronique took his hand with a possessive gesture. He was the only one who really understood the value of the lot being fought over. An antique brooch, the son explained. 19th century, marvelous workmanship. It went to our client, Veronique added. But I got something better. She kissed Christopher on the cheek, leaving a lipstick mark. He looked as embarrassed as a teenager. Planning a big wedding? I asked, clearing away the plates. A chamber one, but lavish, Veronique replied. At the country club. You'll be there, won't you? Christopher said you rarely leave your town. I'll make an exception for an event like this, I said, ignoring the barb. After dessert, Veronique asked me to show her the house. I gave her a brief tour, noting how critically she looked around. This is Christopher's room, I said, opening the door to the former nursery. I'd kept it pretty much intact, only adding a sofa for guests. There were old posters on the walls, model airplanes and science awards on the shelves. God, honey, you never told me you were such a nerd, Veronique laughed, looking at the school photos. Those glasses and that haircut. Christopher blushed, and I felt a prick of irritation. There was a smart, serious boy in those pictures that I was proud of. I had asthma and vision problems, my son mumbled, and Mom always cut my hair herself. Of course she did. Veronique put her arm around his shoulders. Now you're my handsome boy. I thought there was more condescension than tenderness in that phrase. Then we had coffee on the veranda. Veronique checked her phone every 5 minutes, and Christopher watched her like a mesmerized man. I watched them and tried to figure out what he found in this cold woman with the sharp elbows. What's that building? She suddenly asked, pointing to a photograph on the wall. My store, I answered. Or rather, the store where I work. It was a picture of Higginbotham's jewels, taken on opening day. I stood at the entrance, proud and scared at the same time. It looks modest, she remarked. It wouldn't work in our neighborhood. Everyone there prefers the big-name brands. I'm sure they do, I said. We have a different clientele. Dad, I think Veronique is tired from the road, Christopher interjected. We're staying at a hotel on the way into town. We could spend the night here, I suggested. There are plenty of rooms. Oh, thank you, but we've already booked a room, Veronique said hastily. I don't sleep well in unfamiliar places. Or places you don't think are good enough, I thought, but kept silent. As they left, Veronique looked back at my house with an expression that could be read as, poor old man. I waved them off and went back inside, feeling strangely relieved that they were gone. The next morning they stopped by to say goodbye before heading back to town. Veronique stayed in the car with the window down. It was nice to meet you, Mr. Higginbotham, she said with a duty smile. I hope to see you at the wedding. I'll be there. I walked to the car and held out a small box. This is for you. Just a little gift. Inside were silver earrings with aquamarines. Nothing fancy, but I made them myself years ago. Oh, how nice. She opened the box and looked at the earrings without much interest. Thank you. It's very touching. The box disappeared into her bag. I was sure she would never wear those earrings. Dad, I'll call you next week. Christopher hugged me. Are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm fine, I reassured him. Take care of yourself. And Veronique, too. They drove away and I stood at the gate staring after them. Something told me that my life would never be the same again. In the evening, I went to the store, went down to the workshop and took out of the safe a special stone, a rare yellow diamond that I had bought at an auction 3 years ago. I had planned to use it for a special job, but I kept putting it off. Now it was time. I began sketching the ring, a wedding gift for my future daughter-in-law. Maybe once she recognized the value of the gift, she would change her attitude toward me. Or maybe I just wanted to impress her. In any case, working with stones had always calmed me, and now I needed just that. I spent a few hours sketching, trying to push away thoughts of what kind of wife Veronique would be for my son. My intuition said not a good one. But could I change anything? Christopher looked at her with the same adoration I'd once had for his mother. Except Evelyn never made me feel bad about my past. The next months passed in a sort of feverish pace of wedding preparations. Christopher called almost every week, talking about the colors, the menu, the guest list, and other details that, frankly, I didn't care much about. I listened to him with a smile, enjoying the enthusiasm in his voice, and trying not to think about the woman behind all those decisions. "Dad, did you get the invitation?" he asked in early June. Veronique had insisted on sending them out in advance. "Yes, it came last week," I replied, looking at the thick cream-colored envelope lying on the table. "Very elegant." Veronique organized everything. "She has impeccable taste," I could hear the pride in his voice. "Did you confirm your presence?" "Of course I did. I sent a reply the next day." I didn't mention that the invitation included a note for me. "Dress code is strict. Please comply." As if I was going to show up at my son's wedding in overalls. "Oh, great. Listen, we want to invite you to dinner next weekend. Something to discuss. Can you come into town?" I didn't get out of Mountain Home much, but this was an exception. "Yeah, sure. Is it important?" "We'll talk when we meet," the son replied evasively. Veronique made a reservation at the Azure for 7. Azure was one of the most expensive restaurants in town. I'd heard of it, but I'd never been there. I'll be in town by 6, and I'll stop by before the restaurant." Um, uh, "I'd better meet you there right away," Christopher said quickly. Veronique had an appointment with the florist right before dinner, so we'd go straight to the restaurant. I'd noticed how often my son had been dodging invitations to his house lately. I used to always stay at his place when I came into town. Now it seems the rules have changed. "Whatever you say," I agreed. "I'll book a hotel room." "No need. I've already arranged it," he said hastily. "There's a nice hotel near the restaurant." Judging by his tone, he wasn't sure of his choice, and I realized that it was a compromise with Veronique. She was probably insisting on something more expensive, and my son was trying to choose a place that, in his opinion, was more in line with my habits. "Thanks, son. I'll see you this weekend." I hung up the phone and went back to my desk where an unfinished sketch of a ring for Veronique lay. The yellow diamond required a special setting, something elegant, but not too traditional. I wanted her to understand that it wasn't just a gift from her father-in-law, but a work of art. I drove my old Ford into town on Friday, parked at the hotel Christopher had booked, and was surprised to find it was a decent place. Not luxurious, but clean and tidy. After checking in and changing, I hailed a cab to the Azure. The restaurant was exactly as I had imagined. High ceilings, dimmed lights, waiters in white gloves, and menus without prices. The maitre d' escorted me to a table where Christopher and Veronique were already seated. "Dad!" My son stood up to give me a hug. "I'm glad you could make it." Veronique smiled her trademark smile, polite and cold at the same time. "Mr. Higginbotham, how are you?" She held out her hand to shake. On her ring finger glittered an impressive diamond ring. "I hope the journey was not tiring." "Not at all," I sat down across from them. "It's a beautiful restaurant." "One of the best in the city," she said proudly. "Christopher and I come here often, don't we, darling?" "Yes, we have a few times." Christopher looked a little embarrassed. I knew his salary as a consulting engineer was decent, but not enough to go to places like this on a regular basis. Veronique must have had a good income, though. The waiter brought the menu, and Veronique immediately took the initiative. "Try the foie gras, Mr. Higginbotham," she suggested. "The cooking here is excellent. And of course, we must order a nice bottle of wine." "Christopher, do you remember that wonderful Bordeaux we had last time?" The whole dinner went on in the same way. Veronique talking, Christopher agreeing, and me watching this strange dynamic and trying to figure out when my self-confident son turned into an obedient executor of someone else's will. "So," I said after the main course, "was there something you wanted to discuss?" Veronique and Christopher exchanged glances. "Yes, Dad," the son began. "We were thinking, I was thinking, maybe you should move closer to us, at least for the wedding and all the preparations." "Why?" I was genuinely surprised. "You have some great planners by the looks of it. What can I do to help?" "It's not about helping," Veronique interjected. "Christopher's worried about you. Living alone in this, country town? At your age, it can be dangerous." "At my age?" I raised an eyebrow. "Sonny, I'm 72, not 92, and I have friends and a job in Mountain Home." "Work," Veronique let out a short laugh. "Yes, of course. That little jewelry store of yours. Christopher tells me that you do some, you're tinkering, polishing." "Repairing and fabricating," I corrected. feeling the irritation rising inside. That's nice. Such a old-fashioned craft. She said the word craft with a touch of disdain, as if it were something undignified. Veronique works with contemporary art, Christopher explained hastily. New trends, conceptual stuff. Yes, I remember, I nodded. The gallery, the international connections. Exactly, she smiled smugly. Next week I'm flying to Milan for the opening of the exhibition, and then to Paris to negotiate with new artists. Christopher, unfortunately, will not be able to accompany me. He's too busy at work. She gave him a reproachful look, and her son lowered his eyes guiltily. Anyway, Mr. Higginbotham, Veronique continued, think about the offer. We could find you an apartment in our neighborhood. Something small but decent. Thank you for your concern, but I prefer my own house, I said firmly. Dad, no one's suggesting you sell the house. Christopher looked worried. Just to live in the city for a while. Get to know Veronique's parents, our friends. Veronique's parents? I looked at my future daughter-in-law. I'd love to meet them. Oh, they're very busy people, she said quickly. My dad runs an investment fund. My mom is on the board of directors of several companies, but they'll definitely be at the wedding, which is in 3 months, I reminded her. I don't see the point in moving to the city for that long. I'll be there a week before the ceremony, and that's enough. Veronique pressed her lips together, clearly unhappy with my stubbornness. Well, that's your decision, she said coldly. Christopher had so hoped you'd agree. My son looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, a mixture of disappointment and relief. It's okay, he said, smiling strainedly. I just thought you'd be more comfortable. But if you'd rather stay in Mountain Home, I understand. Speaking of the wedding, Veronique changed the subject abruptly. We've decided that the best man will be Hampton, Christopher's best friend since college. You won't be offended that you weren't chosen for the role, will you? I never expected to be best man at my son's wedding. It's not traditional for the father of the groom. Of course not, I replied. The Hamptons are an excellent choice. And one more delicate thing, she continued, not letting me finish. There's going to be a little speech from the bride's parents. My father is an excellent speaker, but Christopher's worried that you might want to speak too. It might be, exhausting for the guests, 2 speeches in a row. I looked at my son, who was clearly uncomfortable. Dad, it's not that. It's okay, I interrupted him. I wasn't planning on giving a speech. Oh, what a relief, Veronique exclaimed with feigned joy. Public speaking is so stressful, especially for people of your generation who aren't used to modern presentation standards. Veronique, Christopher's voice had a hint of irritation in it at last. My father would have been perfectly capable of giving a speech if he'd wanted to give one. Of course, darling, she patted his arm. I'm just concerned for the comfort of everyone involved, especially your father. I don't want him to feel obligated to do something he may not be able to do. Her words were packaged in a wrapper of concern, but inside lurked the purest disdain. That's very thoughtful of you, I said, not hiding the irony. But I assure you, if I decided to make a speech, I could have done it. I'm sure you would. She smiled her fake smile. I'm just saying it's not necessary, isn't it, Christopher? Yes, of course, her son surrendered again. But if Dad wants to... I don't, I said firmly. How? But I appreciate the offer. The rest of the dinner passed in a tense atmosphere. Veronique asked me about Mountain Home, pretending to be interested, but every question had a catch in it. How do you get to your job? Do you take the bus? Or do you have a car? I have a Ford, I answered. 9 years old, but in good condition. Oh, how practical, she exchanged a glance with Christopher. We recently bought a new Audi. Christopher deserves something special. He works so hard. Veronique insisted, the son said, embarrassed. My old car was quite reliable, but not representative enough, she cut him off. In your position, you need a certain status. I thought about how my son's priorities had changed since he'd met this woman. He had never cared about status or representativeness before. When the bill arrived, I reached for my wallet, but Veronique stopped me. Come on, Mr. Higginbottom. We invited you, so we're paying. She pulled a credit card out of her purse and handed it to the waiter without looking at the amount. Thank you for dinner, I said. It was delicious. You're welcome. Christopher and I are used to good food. She glanced at her son again. Although Christopher admitted that he likes your home-cooked food too. It's so rustic simplicity. Daddy's a great cook, Christopher said, an unexpected firmness in his voice. Mom taught him everything she knew. How touching, Veronique smiled playfully. Family traditions are important. Although I must confess I don't cook myself. I'm too busy working. But we have a wonderful cook who comes 3 times a week. After dinner, Christopher drove me back to the hotel. Veronique stayed at the restaurant, ostensibly to meet a colleague who happened to be there. I'm sorry about tonight, my son said when we were alone in the car. Veronique is a little blunt, but she cares about me. I can see that, I replied, trying to sound neutral. The important thing is that you're happy. Ah, I'm happy, Dad. He gave me a brief glance. I am. She's an amazing woman. Smart, driven, just a little demanding. To you or to everyone around her? Christopher sighed. She wants what's best. Sometimes she doesn't calculate her strength. But she likes you, she really does. I remained silent, not wanting to upset my son with outright skepticism. Anyway, thanks for coming, Don't take her words to heart. She didn't mean it. And it's okay, son. I patted him on the shoulder. I'm too old to take offense at what other people say. We said goodbye at the hotel entrance, agreeing to see each other in the morning for breakfast. But early that morning, Christopher sent a message Veronique was suddenly unwell, and they had to cancel. I didn't believe a word of it, but pretended to understand and left for Mountain Home earlier than planned. The following weeks were filled with wedding preparations, or rather, with occasional calls from Christopher with news of the preparations. I was hardly involved in the process myself, except for choosing a suit, which I ordered from a local tailor. Christopher had insisted that I buy a new one, sparing no expense, but I preferred to go to a craftsman I had known for years. At the end of July, Christopher arrived unexpectedly in Mountain Home, alone without Veronique. He looked tired and a little nervous. Papa, I wanted to talk to you, he said, sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea. About Veronique and about the wedding. Is something wrong? I was worried. No, nothing's wrong, he shook his head quickly. It's just, I know things have been difficult between you two, and I want to ask you to be patient with her. She's really stressed out about the wedding, so she can be abrupt sometimes. I don't remember saying anything bad about your fiancé, I said carefully. No, of course not, he looked embarrassed. But I sense that you don't approve of my choice. I stared at him for a long moment, deciding how frank to be. Christopher, I don't know Veronique well enough to approve or disapprove. But if you're asking for my opinion, yes, I'm concerned. She seems, demanding and not always kind. She's just used to a certain way of life, my son defended himself, and wants the best for both of us, including the constant insinuations of my poverty and backwardness. I couldn't bear to say what was bothering me. That's not what she meant, Christopher looked unhappy. It's just that things are different in her world. More luxurious. She grew up in a rich family, used to expensive things. And that's why she thinks it's okay to make fun of my lifestyle? I shook my head. Son, I don't take offense to what she said. I'm worried about you. People like that rarely change. She loves me, Dad, Christopher said firmly, and I love her. Yes, she has her faults, but they are nothing compared to her virtues. Please give her a chance. I sighed, looking at my 40-year-old son, who suddenly seemed so young and vulnerable. Of course I'll give her a chance, and I'll let you be happy too. Thank you, he exhaled with relief. I knew you'd understand. That same evening after Christopher left, I went back to work on the ring for Veronique. The yellow diamond was already set in a platinum setting, elegant but not flashy. It remained to add a few small, white diamonds on the sides. The work required the utmost concentration, and I was grateful for the opportunity to distract myself from my anxious thoughts. Perhaps I really had been unfair to Veronique. Maybe she was just nervous before the wedding, as Christopher had said. Maybe this gift a ring, worth far more than she'd realized I could afford, would change the way she felt about me. And if it didn't, well, at least I'd done my best. The wedding took place in mid-August, a lavish ceremony at a country club with 200 guests, a band, and a 5-tiered cake. I felt like an extra in the crowd of fashionably dressed people talking about yachts, travel, and investments. I was seated at a table with some of Veronique's distant relatives, an elderly aunt and her husband, who spent most of the evening talking among themselves in French, occasionally throwing polite smiles at me. Veronique's parents turned out to be exactly as I had envisioned them, stately, haughty people with impeccable manners and icy eyes. Mr. Edelstein, a tall, gray-haired man with a military bearing, shook my hand with an expression as if it were the greatest condescension on his part. "It's a pleasure," he said in a tone that implied no joy. "Veronique has told me about you." I doubted it was flattering, judging by the way he looked at my suit, which was nice but not from a famous designer. "Likewise," I replied. "You have a wonderful daughter." "Of course," he nodded, as if it were a given. "I hope your son will be able to give her a good life." "Christopher is successful in his field," I said, feeling a muffled irritation rise, "and I'm sure they'll be happy together." "Happiness is important, of course," Mr. Edelstein smiled indulgently, "but a certain level of comfort is also important to my daughter. She's used to the best." That was the end of our conversation. He was distracted by an important guest, and I slipped away to the bar with a sigh of relief. I handed the ring itself to Veronique before the ceremony, entering the bride's room with a small velvet box. "Oh, Mr. Higginbotham." She looked surprised and not too happy to see me. "Shouldn't you be with Christopher?" "He's with the best man," I answered, "and I wanted to give you your wedding present in person." I held out the box, and Veronique took it with a polite smile, clearly not expecting anything special. But when she opened the lid and saw the yellow diamond ring, her face changed. "It's," she stammered, looking at the jewelry. "Is that a real stone?" "Of course," I nodded. 2 carats, clarity VS1, natural yellow color. She looked at me in disbelief. "But how did you—" "It costs—" "Expensive, yes," I smiled. "But nothing is too much for my only son and his bride. Besides, I made it myself. Consider it a family heirloom." "You, by yourself?" Her eyes widened. I told you I work in a jewelry store," I reminded her. Veronique carefully slipped the ring onto her finger and watched it glisten in the light. "It's beautiful," she admitted, and for a moment I thought I heard sincerity in her voice. "Wear it with pleasure." I headed for the door. "And be happy with my son." "Thank you." She was still looking at the ring, not at me. "I'll be sure to show it to my parents. They know a lot about jewelry." I walked out, feeling vaguely disappointed. Even after receiving such a gift, Veronique thought not about its meaning, but about the impression it would make on others. After the wedding, the newlyweds went on a month-long trip to Europe, and I returned to my normal life in Mountain Home. Work at the store, evening walks, dinners with a couple of old friends. Everything went on as usual. Occasionally I'd get postcards from Christopher with views of Venice, Paris, or Barcelona, and short messages like, "We're doing great," or "The weather is beautiful." They returned at the end of September, and calls from her son became even less frequent. He was busy with work, Veronique with her gallery projects. I understood that the newlyweds had their own lives, and I didn't intrude. To be honest with myself, I was even somewhat relieved that I didn't have to communicate with my daughter-in-law as much. At the end of October, Christopher called unexpectedly and said he was coming for the weekend. Alone, without Veronique. "She's on a business trip," he explained. "A new gallery opening in Chicago. I thought it had been a long time since I'd visited you." I was glad he was here. We spent 2 days doing the things we used to love, fishing on the lake, long talks by the fireplace, watching old movies. He seemed relaxed and happy away from his wife, and it got me thinking. "How's married life?" I asked cautiously over dinner on Saturday. "Good," he answered a little too quickly. "Veronique is an amazing woman. Very determined." "I've noticed that," I nodded. "Are you happy?" Christopher hesitated, looking down at his plate. "Of course I am. I'm just adjusting to the new rhythm of life. Veronique has a lot of social obligations, activities. Sometimes I get tired of it." "You never liked noisy gathering," I remarked, remembering how quiet and reserved he'd been as a child. "Yes, but it's important to Veronique. Status, connections," he shrugged. "I try to fit in." I wanted to say that he shouldn't change for someone else, but I didn't. Christopher had already made his choice. What about your ring? Did she like it? I asked, changing the subject. My son's face brightened. She loved it. She shows it to everyone. Even my parents were impressed. Veronique's father asked where I bought it. And what did you say? I told him the truth that you made it. Christopher smiled. He didn't believe it at first. He thought that such work could only be done in a famous jewelry house. That's good to hear. I was pleased that my work had been recognized. So now he knows that I'm not just an old man from the provinces? My son was embarrassed. Dad, no one thinks of you that way. We both knew it wasn't true, but we didn't pursue the subject. After Christopher left, winter came, snowy and cold this year. I spent Christmas alone, declining my son's invitation. Veronique was planning a grand reception, and the prospect of spending the holiday among strangers didn't appeal to me. Instead, I invited George and Helen Prentice, an elderly couple I had been friends with for many years, to Christmas dinner. In January, I broke my arm slipping on an icy porch. It was nothing serious, a non-displaced fracture of the radius, but the delicate work in the workshop had to be put off for a few weeks. Christopher, having heard about it, insisted on coming over. I'll take a couple of days off, he said. You need help. You don't have to. I tried to talk him out of it. The neighbors come by every day, bringing groceries, and in a week the cast will be off. I've already bought the tickets, my son said firmly. I'll be there tomorrow evening. To my surprise, he arrived with Veronique. She walked into my house looking like she was doing me a huge favor and immediately started commenting on everything around her. God, Christopher, it's so cold in here, she exclaimed, even though it was at least 20 degrees in the house. And these stairs are a real trap for the elderly. No wonder you fell, Mr. Higginbotham. I slipped on the ice, not the steps, I clarified. Mr. Higginbotham, you must realize you're not getting any younger. And your job. It's a strain on your eyes, especially with these lights. She passed her hand around my living room, where it really wasn't too bright. I preferred soft, subdued light. I have excellent eyesight for my age, I replied calmly. And there are special lamps in the workshop. Of course, she smiled patronizingly. Veronique was always finding things to criticize. The food was too plain. My sweater looked so old-fashioned. My books were gathering dust. Christopher tells me you work part-time at some jewelry store, she said over dinner. Isn't that hard for you? At your age, it must be hard to hold down a full-time job. I work as much as I want, I replied. The advantage of having your own business. Your own business? She raised her eyebrows. I thought you were just helping out there with something. I own the store. I decided not to go into details. But I have a manager and employees. Oh, she clearly didn't expect that answer. How interesting. But still, at your age, it's better to get more rest, especially with an injury like this. On the second day of their stay, the unexpected happened. Veronique announced that she wanted to go shopping downtown. I doubt there's anything worthwhile here, she said, but I saw some mention of an antique shop on the internet. Christopher, will you come with me? Actually, I was going to help my father with the cleaning, he said uncertainly. Come on, she rolled her eyes. Your father will do just fine on his own. It's just for a couple hours. Go ahead, I said. I can really handle it. Besides, Helen promised to come by after lunch and bring a pie. After they left, I did do some light cleaning using my healthy arm. The cast was in the way, but not too much. When I was done, I decided to go out into town too. It was a clear, frosty day, and a little fresh air wouldn't hurt. I walked to my store, deciding to check on things. Higginbotham's Jewels was in an old building on the main street. Not the most prominent place, but not out of the way either. The windows were decorated modestly with no flashy signage. Instead, the windows were filled with antique jewelry boxes and old jewelers' tools, attracting the attention of true connoisseurs. Entering through the back door, I said hello to Sarah, the young girl who worked as our assistant. Mr. Higginbotham, she smiled. How's your arm? It's healing, I showed her the cast. I thought I'd drop in and see how you were doing. It's fine, she assured me. Mr. Lloyd's in the shop today, and I'm seeing clients. By the way, there's a lady in there right now who's interested in a sapphire necklace. I won't interrupt. I nodded. I'll just sit in my office and look over the paperwork. My office was in the back of the store, with a small window overlooking the sales floor. I sat down at my desk and began to look over the invoices and orders that had accumulated during my absence. Andrew Lloyd, my manager, kept everything in perfect order, but I still like to keep on top of things. Suddenly I heard a familiar voice on the sales floor, and looking out the window I saw Veronique. She was talking to Sarah, looking at a display case of expensive jewelry. "What kind of necklace is that?" she asked, pointing to one of our finest pieces, a sapphire and diamond necklace that I had worked on for almost a month last summer. "An exclusive piece, ma'am," Sarah replied. "Top quality sapphires, marquise cut, platinum setting with diamonds." "May I try it on?" Veronique was clearly interested. I stayed in the office, watching through the window. Part of me wanted to go out and see my sister-in-law's reaction, but another part of me was curious what she would say, unaware of my presence. Sarah pulled a necklace out of the window and helped Veronique put it on. She turned to the mirror, admiring her reflection. "Divine," she said. "How much is it worth?" Sarah said the amount, and even from a distance I could see Veronique's eyes widen. "That expensive?" She hesitated. "For such a small town, it's unexpected." "Our jewelry is not only appreciated in Mountain Home, ma'am," Sarah replied politely. "We have customers from all over the state and even beyond." "Really?" Veronique seemed surprised. She didn't think that a place like this could have a successful jewelry business. At that moment, the bell on the door jingled and Christopher entered. He looked a little annoyed. "Veronique, I've been looking all over town for you. You said you'd be at the antique showroom." "I was there," she dismissed it, "but I saw this store and decided to stop by." "Look at this necklace." Christopher turned to Sarah and froze, recognizing her. "Hello, Mr. Higginbotham," said the girl. "I haven't seen you for a long time." "Hello, Sarah." He looked embarrassed. "How are things at the store?" "Ah, fine. Your father just came in. He's in the study." Veronique turned sharply, still with the necklace around her neck. "Your father? What does your father have to do with this?" I decided it was time to intervene, so I left the office. "Hello, Veronique," I said calmly. "I see you like the necklace." She looked at me with a puzzled expression. "What are you doing here?" "I told you I work in a jewelry store," I replied. "My jewelry store? Your jewelry store?" She looked from me to Christopher. "This is your store?" "Higginbotham's Jewelry." I pointed to the sign on the wall. "I've owned it for 30 years. Veronique looked stunned. "But you said you worked here part-time." "I said I work here," I corrected, "which is exactly right. Why didn't you tell me?" She turned to my son. Christopher shrugged. "I thought you knew." We never hid the fact that my father owned a jewelry store. Veronique touched the necklace around her neck. "And this? You made it?" "Yes," I nodded. "Last summer. One of my favorite projects. And the ring you gave me?" "Also my work," I allowed myself a slight smile. "Like so many things in this store." She took off the necklace and placed it carefully on the counter, as if afraid of damaging it. "I don't understand," she muttered. "If you have such a business, why do you live like this?" "Like what?" I asked. "Well, modestly," she hesitated, choosing her words. "In this old house, with this old furniture, why don't you buy something more personable?" "Because I don't need anything presentable," I answered simply. "I like my life the way it is." Veronique pressed her lips together, clearly trying to comprehend the new information. "You know, when I saw this store from the street, I thought it was some old-fashioned store with cheap knickknacks," she admitted. "But when I walked in and saw this jewelry, I was surprised, and I thought, poor people don't belong here. This is not for people on a tight budget." I looked at her carefully, trying to see if she realized the irony of her words. "Us, and all this time you've been—" She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. "All this time I've been who I am," I said. "A jeweler, a business owner, and your husband's father. Nothing's changed, Veronique. You just know a little more now." She blushed, either from embarrassment or anger. "Why didn't you tell me right away? Why did you let me think—" "What were you thinking, Veronique?" I asked quietly. "That I was a poor old man, unworthy of your attention? That my son came from the lower class and should therefore be grateful for your interest? Or that my humble life somehow makes me a less valuable person?" Christopher put his hand on my shoulder. "Dad, I think we all need to calm down. Veronique looked at the jewelry displays, at my plastered hands, at the name of the store on the wall. Her face expressed a whole range of emotions, from disbelief to embarrassment, and finally a strange kind of admiration. "All this time," she murmured, "all this time you've let me behave like a man who judges others by appearances." I finished for her. "Yes, I have. I was curious if your opinion would change once you got to know me better." "And now you think I'm going to change my attitude because you have money?" A note of challenge appeared in her voice. "No," I shook my head. "I hope you'll change your attitude because you'll realize how shallow your judgment was. It's not about money, Veronique. It's about respect." She was silent, and I could see the contradictory thoughts flickering in her eyes. Finally, she squared her shoulders and said with unexpected dignity, "You're right. I have behaved unworthily, and I am ashamed of it." I wasn't sure of the sincerity of those words, but I nodded, accepting her apology. "Well, now we can start over," I said, "on a more honest basis." Christopher looked relieved, but something in Veronique's eyes told me that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in our troubled relationship. The next day, Christopher and Veronique left for the city. The goodbye was awkward. Veronique seemed confused, smiling too wide and talking too loud. She mentioned twice that I should definitely visit them now, and that they had a very spacious guest bedroom with a beautiful view. Christopher looked exhausted and hardly said a word. After they left, I returned to my normal life. After a week, I had my cast off and was able to work fully in the workshop. Now, as I write these lines, 2 months have passed since that incident in the store. A lot has changed in that time, and I can't say it's for the better. The first signs that Veronique had reconsidered her attitude toward me came a few days after they left. I received a package of expensive whiskey with a note. "Thank you for your hospitality, Veronique." The gesture was beautiful, but seemed a little forced to me. I rarely drank hard liquor, and she could hardly have missed it during our acquaintance. Then there were calls, first from Christopher as usual, but gradually Veronique began to join him. Her tone changed dramatically. Now she spoke to me almost ingratiatingly, asking about my projects, my health, my plans. "Robert," she called me by my first name instead of the formal Mr. Higginbotham. "You must come to us this weekend. We're having a small dinner with close friends, and I'd really like to introduce you." "Unfortunately, I have a lot of work to do," I politely declined. Maybe next time." "But it's been so long since we've seen you." Her voice was getting a little cranky. "Christopher, tell your father he has to come." The son sighed into the receiver. "Dad, if you're busy, we understand, but it would be great to see you." I could feel the tension in his voice and realized that my refusal was embarrassing him in front of his wife. But the thought of a social evening surrounded by Veronique's friends was truly repulsive to me. Eventually, 3 weeks after the incident, I agreed to come not for a dinner party, but just a family dinner. Christopher met me at the train station, and I noticed at once how gaunt and tired he looked. "Is everything okay?" I asked as we got into the car. "Yes, sure," he said with a strained smile. "Just a lot of work. And Veronique, well, she's very emotional." I nodded, not wanting to press my son with questions. Their apartment was in an upscale neighborhood of the city, spacious, with high ceilings and a view of the park. Everything about it smelled expensive, from the marble countertops in the kitchen to the antique furniture in the living room. I noted to myself that the few times I'd been there before the wedding had made it even more luxurious. Veronique met me at the door, elegant, smiling, with perfect hair and makeup. "Robert," she kissed me on the cheek, "I'm so glad you finally arrived. Come in, I've made your favorite tea." I doubted she knew what kind of tea I preferred, but I thanked her politely. Throughout the meal, Veronique was the epitome of hospitality, serving me the best bites, asking about my projects, admiring my knowledge of gemstones. Christopher was mostly silent, occasionally inserting a brief comment. "Robert, I recently told my parents about your store," Veronique said over dessert. "My father was very impressed. He collects rare jewelry, and now he's interested in your work." "Really?" I tried not to make my skepticism too obvious. "Yes, he'd even like to meet you. Maybe order something exclusive for Mom for their anniversary." "That's an interesting suggestion," I replied discreetly, "but I'm on a pretty tight schedule right now." Veronique frowned a little, but quickly put a smile back on her face. "Of course I understand. You're such a sought-after craftsman. That's admirable. There was something fake in her voice, as if she were repeating memorized phrases. I saw Christopher wince, and I felt sorry for him. After lunch, Veronique offered to show me their new winter garden, an extension to the apartment they'd recently added. As we walked through the living room, I noticed a silver-framed photograph of me on the dresser, a picture taken at their wedding. It hadn't been here before. "Oh, you noticed," Veronique said, following my gaze. "I decided that family photos should be in a prominent place. You're such an important part of our family." I nodded, not knowing what to say to this sudden display of family affection. The winter garden was beautiful, bright, spacious, with lots of exotic plants and comfortable wicker chairs. We sat down and Veronique offered coffee. "You know," she began when it was just the two of us. Christopher had gone to the kitchen to make an espresso. "I've been thinking a lot about our first meeting and the way I've been acting all this time." I waited for her to continue, not helping her find the words. "I was not respectful enough," she said at last, "judging superficially. Now I realize what a remarkable man you are." "And what changed your mind, Veronique?" I asked her bluntly. "The fact that I own a successful business?" She blushed a little, but quickly got over herself. "No, of course not. It's just that I got to know you better. I saw your talent, your wisdom. It's strange that you didn't notice it before," I said. "I haven't changed." She looked away, fiddling with her napkin. "Maybe I was too busy with the wedding, with my career, not paying enough attention." "Maybe," I agreed, not wanting to get into the discussion. Christopher returned with a tray, and the conversation turned to more neutral topics. In the evening, when Veronique went to a meeting with her colleagues, she apologized for at least 10 minutes that she had to leave us. My son and I were finally able to talk frankly. "How are you really doing, son?" I asked when we were alone in the living room. Christopher was silent for a long time, staring out the window at the evening city. "I don't know, Dad," he said at last. "It's complicated." "Veronique, she's changed a lot since the story at your store." "I've noticed," I said dryly. "No, you don't understand," he turned to me. "She talks about you all the time now, about your work, about your talent, wants me to be proud of my father, wants me to introduce you to all our friends, to her parents." "And that's a bad thing?" I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear it from my son. "It's, insincere," he sighed. "She used to think you were a provincial old man who had to put up with you for my sake. Now you're suddenly a brilliant jeweler and head of the family, all because she found out about your business, your fortune." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood, a sign of extreme tension. "I'm constantly caught between two fires," he continued. "She wants me to convince you to move closer to us, to make jewelry for her mother, to show up at her social events. And I know you're not interested in any of that, and that she's not doing it because she loves you, but because of her status," I finished for him, "because I'm no longer a liability in her eyes, but a valuable asset." "Yeah," he nodded, "and I don't know what to do about it." I walked over to my son and put my hand on his shoulder. "Don't do anything," I said calmly. "Live your life. I'm old enough to deal with your wife's obsessive attention, and you don't have to mediate between us." "But she's my wife," he sounded desperate. "And you're my father. I want you two to get along." "We are getting along," I assured him, "in our own way. Don't worry about it." He shook his head. "You don't understand. She's obsessed with getting closer to you. I think it's hurt her that you've seen right through her all this time, that you let her act arrogant when you knew her perceptions of you were false. And now she wants to rehabilitate herself," I suggested. "Not only that," Christopher looked embarrassed, "she sees you as an opportunities, connections to her collectors, access to rare jewelry for her gallery, status in the community." I sighed, not surprised but disappointed. "Well, let her try, but I won't play her games." "I know," he smiled weakly, "and it's causing me problems. She gets angry when I can't talk you into her plans." "I'm sorry you have to come between us," I said sincerely, "but I won't pretend to be something I'm not, even for your peace of mind." "I'm not asking for that," he shook his head. "It's just, I don't know how long this can go on. We talked until late into the night, remembering the past, discussing the present, carefully skirting the future. When Veronique returned, we were already sitting at opposite ends of the room. Christopher at the computer, me with a book. She looked disappointed that she hadn't caught us in a heart-to-heart conversation. "What were you two talking about without me?" she asked with feigned cheerfulness. "Not about me, I hope." "We were discussing a new order that I received." I lied to save my son from having to get out of it. "A collector from Europe wants a series of brooches in the Art Deco style." "Oh, how interesting," Veronique exclaimed. "You must tell my father about it. He has a collection of vintage cufflinks, and I'm sure he would love your work." "Maybe next time," I said evasively. "I will. I'll organize dinner." She was enthusiastic. "And by the way, I spoke to the director of our gallery. We are thinking about organizing an exhibition of rare jewelry next season. It would be wonderful if you would agree to exhibit some of your work." I noticed Christopher tense up. Obviously, this was not Veronique's first attempt to use my name for her professional purposes. "It's a flattering offer," I said cautiously, "but I prefer to keep a low profile. My clients value confidentiality." "But this is such an opportunity," as she insisted. "Your work will be seen by influential people, collectors, investors." "My reputation in professional circles is quite strong," I gently declined. "And frankly, at my age, I don't need any additional fame." Veronique looked disappointed but quickly changed tactics. "Of course, I understand. But perhaps you would at least agree to advise us? We could organize a small lecture for selected guests. Can you imagine how exclusive it would be? A private conversation with a master of your level." I saw Christopher roll his eyes behind her back, and I couldn't help but smile. "I'll think about it," I replied evasively, knowing I'd never agree to something like that. I left the next morning, despite Veronique's best efforts to convince me to stay another day. Christopher walked me to the train station. "I'm sorry about all this," he said as we waited for the train. "She's not always so clingy." "It's okay," I patted his shoulder. "The important thing is that you're happy." He looked away, and that gesture told me more than any words could. Back in Mountain Home, I immersed myself in work, the best cure for anxious thoughts. The following weeks brought a new wave of attention from Veronique: calls, gifts, invitations. She even came once, alone without Christopher, ostensibly on gallery business, and spent the whole day asking me about my business, my clients, my working techniques. I answered politely but discreetly, without revealing any significant details. In early March, Christopher called me late one night. I could tell from his voice that something was wrong. "Dad, I need to talk to you," he said after the usual greetings. "In private, Veronique is on a business trip for the rest of the week." "What's wrong?" I was wary. "Not on the phone." He was quiet. "I'll come over tomorrow, if you don't mind." "Sure, son. I'm waiting for you." I lay awake all night wondering what could have happened. Christopher arrived in the morning, gaunt, with circles under his eyes, but determined. "Veronique wants me to convince you to make her co-owner of the store," he said without preamble as we sat down at the kitchen table. "She thinks that with her connections in the art world and your skills, you could take the business international." I stared at my son in silence, waiting for him to continue. "I refused," he ran his hand over his face. "I said it was your business, and I wouldn't interfere. We had a big fight." "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. "Don't apologize," he shook his head. "It wasn't your fault. It's just, I'm starting to realize that I may have made a mistake marrying her. She's not the person I thought she was." I was silent for a long time, searching for words. "Christopher, I can't and won't decide for you, but whatever you choose, I'm on your side." He nodded, looking out the window at the snow-covered garden. "You know, when Mom died, you told me that real wealth isn't money or things, but the people around you?" I didn't fully understand then. I do now. I remembered that conversation. Christopher was 20, just starting out on his own. Evelyn hadn't left us a huge inheritance, but she had given us something more valuable: the ability to see the real value of things and people. "I have everything one could dream of," the son continued. "A prestigious job, a beautiful apartment, status, but I don't feel happy. And you live in this small town, in this old house, and you seem more whole and peaceful than I ever was." "Because I live the way I want to live," I replied simply. not trying to conform to other people's expectations. Exactly, he grinned bitterly. And I'm always trying to please first at university, then at work, now Veronique. And somewhere along the way I lost myself. We talked all afternoon and evening. Christopher stayed the night and left in the morning, calmer but still thoughtful. I didn't know what decision he would make about his marriage, but I was sure he would find the strength to do the right thing. After he left, I sat in a chair by the fireplace for a long time, pondering the strange irony of life. My hidden wealth, which had once been just a part of me that didn't define who I was now the cause of discord in the family. Veronique, upon learning of my status, changed her attitude toward me to the diametrically opposite from dismissive to ingratiating. But neither was true. She didn't see me as a person, only as a symbol of status or lack thereof. And Christopher, my son, was caught between us, between his wife, eager to use my status to advance herself, and his father, refusing to play by her rules. It pained me to see him suffer, but I knew I couldn't solve this problem for him. I went to the window and looked out at the snow-covered garden. Somewhere out there, under the snow, the spring flowers that Evelyn loved so much were getting ready to wake up. What would she say now? Probably the same things she'd always said. To be honest with myself and others. To live according to my values, not other people's expectations. Wealth was never an end in itself for me, just the result of a job I loved. Family meant so much more. And now, as these two parts of my life came into conflict, I realized that I was not willing to sacrifice my principles for the sake of ostentatious peace, even for my son's peace of mind. In the long run, it wouldn't do either of us any good. About a week after Christopher's visit, I received a call from Andrew Lloyd, my manager. He rarely called. He usually handled things himself, without too much consultation. "Mr. Higginbotham," he began, somewhat embarrassed, "I have something unusual to report." "What is it?" I was alarmed. "Trouble with the store?" No, it's fine. It's just, we've been getting new customers. Quite wealthy, by the looks of it. They're interested in your work, asking if they can meet you in person." Shunanam, what's so strange about that? We've been working with wealthy clients for years, though usually through referrals, not from the street. "What's strange is that they all mention your sister-in-law," Andrew said quietly. "Veronique Edelstein Higginbotham. They say she talked about you at some gallery reception, introduced you as a jewelry genius working in solitude." I sighed. So Veronique had started using my name actively. "One more thing," Andrew continued. "A lady mentioned that your sister-in-law was talking about the exclusive collection of rare stones you've been collecting for decades. Said you kept untold riches in your house. That was an outright lie. I did have a small collection of unusual stones, but no untold riches I did not keep at home. Everything of value was kept in a safe at the store." "Thanks for letting me know, Andrew," I said. "I'll look into it." That evening, Sarah, our assistant, called. "Mr. Higginbotham, I'm sorry to bother you, but I thought you should know," she said quickly, clearly worried. "Your sister-in-law came into the store today. She was asking about customers, orders. She wanted to see the shop, but Mr. Lloyd wouldn't let her without your knowledge." I was grateful for Andrew's discretion. "What else did she say?" "Mostly she wanted to know which celebrities were ordering jewelry from you, and she mentioned that she would soon be more involved in the family business." I thanked Sarah for the information and decided to call my son, but Christopher didn't answer all evening, which wasn't like him. The next day, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Veronique smiling, elegant, with a big file in her hands. "Robert," she kissed me on the cheek. "What a surprise, isn't it?" I was in the neighborhood on business and decided to stop by. Mountain Home was a 3-hour drive from town. Business in the neighborhood didn't sound very convincing. "Come on in," I let her in. "Does Christopher know you're here?" "Oh, he's at a conference in Boston," she said with a wave of her hand. I decided to use this time productively. "I have so many ideas for our collaboration." "Our collaboration?" I raised an eyebrow. "Of course." She walked into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "I've put together a whole plan to promote your brand. Exclusive shows, private meetings with collectors, perhaps even a line of jewelry curated by me." She opened a folder on the table. Inside were glossy printouts, charts, photos of jewelry, magazine clippings. Veronique, I sat down across from her. I haven't agreed to any promotion or collaboration. But this is such an opportunity, she exclaimed. You have no idea how much interest my stories about you have generated. People are fascinated by the story of a humble genius creating masterpieces in a provincial town. And what exactly did you tell them? I asked, holding back my irritation. Only the truth, she smiled. Well, maybe a little embellishment for dramatic effect. You know how important that is in the art world, the story, the legend behind the work. And what legend have you created about me? Veronique was a little embarrassed, but quickly got over herself. Nothing special. Just told me that you work in seclusion, create unique things, collect rare stones, that your works are real works of art, not available to the general public. And that I have untold riches at home. I decided to get straight to the point. She blushed a little. It's just a figure of speech. I meant your knowledge, your talent. Veronique, I shook my head. We both know that's not true. You're creating a false perception of me that could be dangerous. Dangerous, she laughed. Don't exaggerate. I'm just helping you get the recognition you deserve. I never sought widespread recognition, I said firmly, and I didn't give you permission to speak for me or use my name to promote your gallery. Her smile faded, her eyes went cold. I thought you would understand the benefit of our cooperation, she said in a different tone. It's a win-win proposition. You get new clients, I get prestigious connections. I don't need new clients, I replied. My business works fine as it is. But it could work better, she insisted. With my connections, with my experience in the art world, you could go international, compete with the leading jewelry houses. And would you get a percentage of this expansion? I asked bluntly. Veronique hesitated. Of course, my work should be paid, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is family cooperation. We are not a family in the sense that you put into this word. I tried to speak calmly. You're my son's wife. That doesn't give you the right to my business. Shirokini. But Christopher is your only son, she said with a steely tone in her voice. He will inherit everything, and I'm his wife. We're one and the same. Doesn't it make sense that I should be part of the family business? Now I could see where she was going with this all along. Veronique didn't just want to use my connections. She saw herself as part owner of the business. Christopher had no interest in the jewelry business, I reminded her. Hell, he had his own career, his own interests. Which could change, she countered, especially if he sees new business opportunities. I've already discussed expansion prospects with him. That was news. Christopher hadn't mentioned any such discussions. What did he say? I asked, doubting that I would get an honest answer. He's open to ideas, Veronique said evasively. Oh. He just thinks it's up to you to decide, but I'm sure I can convince him to take a more proactive stance. I sighed, realizing that the conversation was reaching an impasse. Veronique, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but my decision remains the same. I don't want any changes in my business, and I ask you to stop spreading information about me without my consent. She was silent for a while, drilling me with her gaze. You're missing a huge opportunity, she said finally, and you're depriving Christopher of a promising future. Christopher is capable of making his own future, I replied. He's never depended on my money or position. But he could use it, she exclaimed. Your modesty borders on stupidity, Robert. At your age, it's time to think about legacy, about putting the business in safe hands. My parents really wanted to get to know you. Christopher looked embarrassed and avoided my gaze. Obviously, this meeting wasn't his idea. Welcome, I stood up. Come in. I'll make some tea. Mr. Edelstein surveyed my house with ill-concealed interest. So this is where the famous jeweler lives, he said with a slight irony. Veronique has told me so much about you that I expected something more. Grandiose. They wanted to use my business and skills to create an empire through their connections. Veronique was to be the curator of a new line of jewelry. What is my son's role in this scheme? I asked. Veronique and her parents exchanged quick glances. Well, Christopher could do the administrative part, Veronique said uncertainly, or pursue his career as he prefers. So he's not a necessary part of your family alliance? I clarified. Dad, Christopher said quietly, you don't have to. No, son, you do. I turned to Veronique and her parents. Let's get this straight. You came to my house with a plan to reorganize my business without consulting me. You spread information about me without my permission. And now you're proposing a partnership in which I create and you profit from my work. You're oversimplifying things, Mr. Edelstein said coldly. Marketing, promotion, contacts. That's work too, and very valuable. I'm sure it is, I nodded. But I didn't ask for it, and I don't need it. My business has been doing just fine for 30 years, and I see no reason to change. There was a heavy silence. Veronique looked furious, her parents insulted. You're making a mistake, Veronique said. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Maybe, I agreed, but it's my life and my right to make a mistake. What about Christopher? She turned to her husband. Don't you want your rightful inheritance? Turn it into something more? My inheritance? Christopher raised his head. Sunday, that's what you think about all the time, isn't it? Money, status, opportunity? Not me, not my father. Don't be silly, she cut him off. I think about our future, about what we could accomplish together. No, Veronique, he shook his head. You're thinking about what you could accomplish with my father and his money. You've never really been interested in me or him, only in what we could give you. Christopher, Mrs. Edelstein exclaimed, how can you say such a thing to your wife? Because it's true, he answered quietly, and we all know it. Mr. Edelstein rose, his face flushed with anger. I see that our visit was a mistake, he said icily. We thought we were dealing with intelligent people who understood the possibilities for development. Turns out we were wrong. Veronique, here, she shouted, because I see potential where you see only stability and peace. No, Christopher intervened, because you've never been able to appreciate the present. You've always looked at people as a means to an end. Veronique turned to him, her face contorted with rage. How dare you, after everything I've done for you? You were nothing when I met you, an inconspicuous engineer with an outdated closet. I've made you a man to show off in society. That's it, Christopher grinned bitterly. So you've made a man of me. And I thought I had been all the time. Mrs. Edelstein came up to her daughter and put her hand on her shoulder. Come along, dear. Obviously, we're wasting our time here. These people don't appreciate your efforts. Yes, Mother, Veronique straightened up. You're right as always. She turned to Christopher. Are you coming with us, or are you staying here with your precious father? There was an ultimatum in her question, and we all understood it. Christopher rose slowly. I'll go to town, he said, but not with you. I need to gather my things from the apartment. Veronique turned pale. What does that mean? It means I'm not coming home, he said firmly. At least not tonight and not with you. You can't just leave, she exclaimed. We're married. Yes, he nodded, but I'm not sure it was the right decision anymore. You'll regret it, she said. Both of you will. No one turns his back on Veronique Edelstein with impunity. With these words, she left the house, slamming the door loudly. Her parents followed her, casting scornful glances at us. After the dramatic departure of Veronique and her parents, Christopher and I sat in silence for a long time. He looked devastated, but there was a determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. What now? I asked, breaking the silence. I don't know, he shook his head. I need to pack my things, find a temporary place to live. I don't think Veronique and I will be able to live under the same roof after this. You can stay here as long as you need to, I suggested. Thanks, Dad. He smiled weakly. But I need to work things out in the city. The job, the apartment, all the formalities. He stopped talking, then added more quietly. Marriage. I realized that my son was facing a difficult task, not only emotionally, but also practically. Divorce is always difficult, and divorce with a woman like Veronique promised to be especially difficult. I'll help you in any way I can, I said. I know, he nodded. Just don't feel guilty. It wasn't your fault. I should have seen who she really was before the wedding. All the signs were there. Love often prevents us from seeing the obvious, I said. Don't blame yourself. Christopher left for the city that evening, promising to call daily. I spent the next 2 weeks anxiously awaiting news. My son kept his word. He called every day, but the conversations were short and not very informative. I realized he needed space to handle things on his own. Meanwhile, I decided it was time to stop hiding. For years, I had led a modest life, not out of fear or avarice, but because it was what I was comfortable with. But the events of the last few months have shown me that sometimes such secrecy can lead to unexpected consequences. On Monday, I came to the store earlier than usual and gathered all the employees. Starting today, I'll be spending more time here, I informed them. Not because I don't trust your work, but because I want to be more involved in the daily life of the store. Andrew looked surprised but pleased. You're always welcome here, Mr. Higginbotham, he said. The customers will be delighted too. I want to warn you, I added, that my sister-in-law, Veronique, is no longer involved in the business. If she comes or calls with questions about the store, orders, or customers, don't provide any information. Direct all inquiries to me. Everyone nodded, although it was obvious by the look on their faces that they had a lot of questions. I didn't go into details. Privacy should remain private. After the meeting, Andrew lingered in my office. Is everything all right, sir? He asked me cautiously. You seem troubled. Everything will be fine, I replied. It's just a family emergency. Nothing will affect the store, don't worry. He nodded, but before he left, he asked another question. What about the people who came in on your sister-in-law's recommendation? Some of them have become good customers. I thought for a moment. Work with them as usual. But if they start asking personal questions or mentioning Veronique, be careful. I spent the next few days fully immersed in my work. I came to the store early in the morning, left late at night. For the first time in many years, I personally met with customers, discussed orders, showed stones and sketches. Many were surprised to learn that the modest elderly man sitting at the table in the workshop was the very mysterious jeweler about whom rumors had been circulating. I imagined you differently, admitted one lady, a collector of antique jewelry. From what Mrs. Edelstein Higginbotham told me, you seemed more eccentric, I suggested with a smile. Perhaps, she said, embarrassed. She described you as a recluse, surrounded by rare stones and antique instruments. I'm afraid the reality is much more prosaic. I showed her my desk with the usual tools. No mysticism, just years of practice. Gradually, I began to feel that I was returning to my real self. Not hiding, but not flaunting it either. It was a freedom I hadn't felt in a long time. At the end of April, Christopher came to Mountain Home, gaunt, with shadows under his eyes, but with an inner calm that had never been there before. I filed for divorce, he said, sitting with me in the garden. Veronique had thrown a tantrum, then tried to blackmail me, and now she was threatening to ruin me in court. Does she have grounds? I asked, worried about my son. Not really. We had a prenup. At her insistence, which is ironic, he grinned bitterly. She was afraid I might claim her parents' money in the event of a divorce. Now that same contract protects me from her claims. What about the apartment? The car? Anam, I'm leaving the apartment to her. I don't want to live there after what happened. I sold the car too. Too many memories. I'm starting from scratch. And now what? I asked, looking at his tired face. I don't know, Dad. He shrugged. I've been offered a project in Seattle for 6 months, maybe more. I'm thinking of taking it. A change of scenery would do me good. Seattle's a long way away, I said, feeling a pang of regret. I know, he looked at me guiltily. But I need space. From Veronica, from the city, from all this craziness. I understand, I nodded, and I'll support whatever you decide. We talked late into the night. He told me how Veronique had tried to turn his mutual friends against him, how her parents had spread rumors in business circles, how he had to explain himself to his bosses because of the sudden scandal surrounding his name. You know what the weirdest thing is? He said before he went to bed. I feel relieved. It's like I've shed a heavy weight I've been carrying around without realizing it. Sometimes loss is actually a release, I said, especially when you've lost something that's been hurting you for a long time. Christopher left 2 days later, promising to call from Seattle. I was alone in my house, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. Just a quiet acceptance of the situation. Veronique didn't leave us alone, as I'd suspected. A week after Christopher left, she showed up on my doorstep. not as well-groomed as before, with a nervous glint in her eyes. "You have to talk to him," she said without preamble. "Make him come to his senses. It's all your influence." "Annoying, Veronique." I looked at her calmly, not inviting her in. "Christopher's decision is his own. I will not interfere." "You're lying," she raised her voice. "It was you who turned him against me. Out of jealousy because I exposed your poor old man's game." "You ruined your own marriage," I said firmly. "With your greed, with your treatment of people as a means to an end." Christopher just finally saw it. She looked at me with hatred. "You know, I could destroy your reputation," she said through gritted teeth. "One call to the IRS, a couple of rumors among the clients. You could try." I didn't look away. "But my business is fine, and my clients have known me a lot longer than they've known you." "You'll pay for it." She turned around to leave. "Both of you will pay for it." "Veronique," I called out to her, "you should let this situation go. Start a new life. You're young. You're beautiful. You have a career. Don't you dare pity me." She gave me one last furious look and walked away. I sighed as I watched her go. There was something desperate, almost childlike in her anger. Perhaps behind all that ambition and greed, she was just a very insecure woman. As you might expect, Veronique moved from threats to action. A few days later, inspectors from the tax office came to the store. Andrew, fortunately, was ready. All the documents are in full order. All taxes have been paid. The inspection did not reveal any violations. Then rumors began to spread, as if I were selling fakes, cheating customers, overpricing. But my reputation in professional circles was too solid to be destroyed by such gossip. In early May, Christopher called from Seattle. "How are you doing, Dad?" I could hear the concern in his voice. "Veronique isn't bothering you?" "I tried," I answered honestly, "but nothing serious." "How are you settling in?" "It's good. The city's beautiful. The work's interesting." "I rented a small apartment overlooking the bay," he said quietly. "Dad, I wanted to talk to you about the future." "I'm listening." "I'm thinking of staying here for a long time," he said. "Maybe forever. The company is offering a permanent position after the project is finished, and I like the West Coast." I felt my heart squeeze. Seattle was thousands of miles from Mountain Home. "It's a good opportunity," I said, trying to keep my voice upbeat. "You should take it." "But I'm worried about you," he continued. "You're out there alone at your age." "I'm 72, not 92, I reminded him. "And I have a job, friends, a whole life here." "I know," he sighed. "I just feel guilty about moving so far away." "You don't have to," I said firmly. "You have to build your life, Christopher. And if you have to be on the other side of the country to do that, so be it." We talked some more, and I sensed that he really liked the new place. There was an excitement in his voice that I hadn't heard in a very long time. After talking to my son, I sat in the garden for a long time, thinking about the future. My only child would live far away, and we would see each other only rarely. But wasn't that what I had been preparing him for all these years? To be independent, to be able to make decisions and take responsibility for his life? I spent the next weeks building a new model of life without waiting for my son's visits, without thinking about his family. I expanded my social circle. I started seeing old friends more often, met new people through a local jazz club. At the store, I initiated several changes, not because of Veronique's ambitions, but because I really saw the potential for growth. We revamped the website, hired a young marketing specialist, and expanded the assortment. The business started to attract new customers, but it retained its original philosophy, quality above all else. To my surprise, I even began to enjoy being more present in the store, meeting with customers, discussing jewelry designs, searching for rare stones. It all filled my days with energy and meaning. In June, I received an unexpected letter from Veronique's attorney. She demanded compensation for lost profits from the failed cooperation with my store. Allegedly, she had already invested in presentations, meetings with potential clients, and other marketing efforts. I discussed the situation with my attorney, and he assured me that such claims were baseless. There were no written agreements, no contracts. We sent a polite but firm denial. We never heard from Veronique again. Christopher said she'd agreed to the terms of the divorce and was rumored to have started dating some wealthy art collector. She found a replacement quickly, I remarked without surprise. It wasn't me she wanted. It was what I could give her, my son replied, or what she thought you could give her through me. By the end of the summer, the divorce was finalized, and Christopher finally settled in Seattle. He called every week, talking about his new life, his coworkers, the city. I could hear the new notes in his voice: confidence, calm, contentment. You should come visit, Dad, he'd say. You'll love it. The nature here is amazing. The ocean, the mountains. I will, I promised, as soon as I finish the big order I'm working on. In September, I did go to Seattle, the first long-distance trip I'd taken in years. Christopher met me at the airport, and I noticed the change immediately. He looked younger, healthier, and had that sparkle in his eyes that I remembered from his youth. You look good, son, I said, hugging him. I feel reborn, he admitted. It was like a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. His new apartment was small, but bright and cozy, overlooking the bay. No designer frills, no ostentatious things, just what he really needed to live comfortably. Just like your house in Mountain Home, I said with a smile. I guess it's genetics, he smiled. I realized that I didn't need all the luxuries Veronique thought I needed. I felt good like this. We spent a week together, walking around the city, going to the ocean, to the mountains, just talking about life. Christopher introduced me to his new friends. Simple, sincere people he felt comfortable with. The last night before I left, we sat on the balcony, looking out at the lights of the city and the starry sky. You know, Dad, Christopher said suddenly, I've always admired you, your ability to live by your own rules without being pushed around by society. Really, I was surprised. I thought you thought I was too conservative, stuck in the past. Maybe when I was young, he shook his head. Maturing, but the older I got, the more I appreciated your wisdom. You always knew what was important and what was just tinsel. It's called experience, son, I smiled. When you get to my age, you'll be wise too. I hope so, he raised his glass. To true values. To real values, I repeated, clinking glasses with his. Back in Mountain Home, I felt a strange peace. My son was far away, but happy. My former daughter-in-law no longer tried to interfere in my life. My business was thriving because of the changes I had made on my own initiative. I stopped hiding my wealth, although I didn't advertise it. I simply lived as I thought was right, not skimping on the important things, but not spending on ostentatious luxuries either. Life went on with its joys and sorrows, its ups and downs. Sometimes I thought about Veronique, about how strange our relationship was. I didn't hate her, only regret that she had never realized that true wealth was not money or status, but the ability to be true to oneself and one's principles. In October, when the maples in my garden turned gold and purple, I sat on the veranda with a cup of tea and thought about the vicissitudes of fate. Who would have thought that my humble life would be the cause of such drama, that my successful business, which I never flaunted, would cause so much envy and intrigue? I didn't regret my decision to set clear boundaries with Veronique, to keep her out of my business, to protect what I'd spent decades building. It was the right choice, for me, for my son, even for her, though she would hardly ever admit it. A phone call interrupted my musings. Christopher was calling with good news about a promotion at work. His voice sounded happy, confident, and I knew that everything had worked out exactly the way it was supposed to. Sometimes you have to go through a storm to see a rainbow. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something more valuable. Sometimes you just have to stay true to yourself, even if the whole world is trying to make you change. I finished my tea and went to the workshop. I had a new project that required all my attention and skill. Life went on, and there was still so much beauty I could create with my hands.